Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to a new episode of Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my guest is Paul Nicholaes. I was doing some math before we did this call. I think we've been trying to work this out for about a year and a half. Does that sound right? to get you on this call.
So we kept at it.
So a little bit of background about Paul. So I usually don't give a lot of intros, but just this story is so good. So when we first, I'd only lived in my place for probably maybe 3/4 of a year and a year or so. And I had like a road hockey game going on. And I think it was like March break, I think. And we're playing at the top of the hill, and I got my friend over who he's from Paris, and he's like babysitting a bunch of other kids because he's on like a maternity leave. So we got all this road hockey game going, and Paul's wife, I don't know if we're going to do drop names, but Robin comes up the hill. I didn't know Robin, never met Robin in my life. And she comes up, and your daughter was like kind of shy, wanted to see everybody, but there was a lot of boys, right? And anyway, they're at that age where they're kind of shy about it. So they come up the hill, and she's on her bike, and we're just sitting there. I start chit-chatting with Robin, and she's like, everything, anytime you ever talk to me, it always turns to real estate eventually. And so it says something about real estate, and she's like, oh yeah, well Paul, he he used to do some investing in Cleveland and all this other stuff, and he does these renovations in Kitchener, and like he's been thinking about making a podcast. And I'm like, oh really, what's the podcast about? Oh, how about how to invest in the US? And I was like, no way. You're freaking kidding me. Like, and so Paul like lived like 4 houses away from me, and you're like, like such a small world, right? Like it's such a crazy world. So obviously whenever I came in, I ran in the house, I told my wife, I'm like, Heather, there's the new people at the bottom of the hill, they do real estate. And she's like, awesome. She's like, and they do it in the US. And she's like, what? He's like, oh no, oh no, this is gonna spread.
Bad news.
This is bad news. But anyway, yeah. That's my intro to Paul. Paul, you want to give everyone maybe your intro to what you do, and then we'll get into the story a bit.
Sure, sounds good. Yeah, thanks for that intro. That was good. Yeah, that was funny, man. And what are the odds, right? It's such a weird, I don't know, serendipity, I guess you'd call it, or whatever. But yeah, and she didn't know that you were doing that at all, right? That like had no idea, because we hadn't really met a lot of people yet. And but yeah, we had just been talking about that, so that's really funny. So yeah, I've been kind of an entrepreneur. I've been into a couple of different things. It's always been more tradesy. I had a furniture business, custom furniture business when I was younger. And then when I always had this sense that I wanted to be in real estate. I was into the Tony Robbins stuff and the Rich Dad Poor Dad stuff, and the, all the stuff that goes, all those guys. So I actually ended up going to a real estate seminar in Toronto, and Tony Robbins was there, and Pitbull, like the
yeah,
which was kind of random but fun. But he's like a kind of an investor and stuff, and quite a bit of different things. So he was there as an entertainer, but also as an investor. So he did like this interview, and then he put on this big show, which was really awkward because there's all these like people in suits, all these stiff, real estate people, like, and Pitbull's there, like, the lights went the club for a bit. My wife was with me at the time. She got real sick right during that Tony Robbins thing, so then we had to leave. But it was really cool to see him nonetheless. But I digress. But anyway, so at that real estate seminar, you know how it goes. They sell you all these, or they try to get you to sign up for different courses and things like that. And I ended up signing up for. There was 2 options I was looking at. One of them was tax liens, investing, and the other one was wholesaling, I believe. And both of those were sort of pitched as like, you don't need a lot of capital, you don't need a lot of credit, this and that, and so all of that seemed appealing. So we're like, all right. So we jumped right in and did that and started going down that rabbit hole.
Was it both, or did you have to do one about tax liens or one about wholesaling, or was it both?
Tax liens, yeah. You didn't have to do both. I just
okay, so you did tax liens. Okay, cool.
So went back for another very in-depth seminar on tax lien investing. That was a 3-day, but it was pretty intensive, long days, but really fun and really interesting. Totally opened my eyes to tax lien investing. I didn't even know, I'd never really heard of it before then. I think they do a little bit of it in Canada, maybe out in British Columbia from what I've heard back then, but I don't know if but yeah, so signed up for that seminar, started investing in some tax liens. They had this sort of portal that allowed you to sort of buy tax liens from them that had already been sort of pre-filtered and somewhat pre-qualified. I say that term very loosely, but and they obviously made a little cut, but it was a pretty decent system. So started buying some of those, started doing some of that. The returns were pretty good. They were advertised as around 18%, I believe, in most states, or in some of the states that we were getting the tax liens from. So pretty good return.
Yeah.
And then I went to another seminar in Florida. And this is where things got a little crazy, because we went to this detailed seminar. It was like a mentorship program, which was really cool because we had met some people along the way, and some of them were going to be in Florida at this mentorship program. So we signed up for one of those, and I got a lot out of that, which was awesome. But at that time, we bought some tax liens that were essentially had expired, and instead of them letting them expire, they went through the foreclosure process, and within this company had kind of lawyers do that, and so ended up acquiring these properties. So basically these were properties good to go. So we were already kind of looking at some of these properties about buying something, because we were like, damn, that's so cheap. Like you can get a duplex for 20 grand in Cleveland,
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, totally. We don't know what the inside's like, but it's standing there. It's, Google Map it, right? So we were already kind of like interested in that. And so we ended up buying one, kind of sight unseen. We were in Florida, the place was in Cleveland, and we bought one there from the company. Actually, did we buy two? No, we bought one that was already completely foreclosed, so we just a clear title for the property.
Nice.
And then we bought another tax lien from them that was like very close to being completed in the foreclosure process. So they said.
Guess there's more to that story.
yeah, we can talk about that another time maybe. So we got this property, we're all excited, and we're doing the math. We're like, okay, that's only a 6-hour drive. I already had a renovation background and stuff and construction, so we're like, if it needs a bit of fixing up, I could go there on the weekend or whatever, and we'll spend some time. So we were pretty naive, right? So we went down. Me and a friend of mine went down first, and the place was boarded up. There wasn't a single copper fitting in the entire property. All of it had been removed. The electrical was pretty much like not there either. So there had been a fire in the main floor, intentionally made, you could tell, because they were burning little paint rollers and things that just to stay warm. So somebody had been squatting in there, made a fire in the living room, which of course made everything black. The floor in very bad condition. So all in all, it was a real nightmare of an interior of the house. But we rolled with it. We're like, all right, whatever. We only paid, I don't know what it was, like 12 grand or something ridiculous for it. And it was a huge house. It was kind of a beautiful house, actually. It was on Martin Luther King Drive, which is in every city, is like not the greatest, but a busy street sometimes or whatever. So it was on a fairly busy street, but in a nice, like, I won't say nice, but it was, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So we rolled with it. We ended up fixing up the complete thing. It was a 2-level, 2 apartments. So like the main floor had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom and a kitchen. And then the upstairs was an identical layout, and then stairway in between and stuff. Cool. So we set it up as an Airbnb. We fixed up the entire thing, with many weekends. I say that loosely. It was like more like weeks, but there was times where I'd go a week or 2 at a time and just stay there and work. And I know I'm not really supposed to do that, so hopefully not, too many people listening to that.
Yeah, no.
but we didn't do, like, I should clarify, I guess. We didn't do, I did a lot of work. We hired a lot of local trades. So obviously, like plumbing, the electrical, the furnaces, the roof, we did a lot of that. So I did some flooring, some trim, some paint, this and that. We hired a guy to do a bunch of plaster and painting and stuff. And at the end of it, I can share some pictures at some point, but
Sure.
it turned out like a really nice two bedroom duplex, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
We Airbnb'd it, we put laundry in the basement. And all said and done, we were making pretty good money on the Airbnb. The only issue we were having is every now and then somebody would check into the Airbnb in Cleveland, and they would be from somewhere that is not Cleveland and had never experienced a place like Cleveland or Detroit or whatever, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. A
And
little rougher.
a bit antsy or nervous, or they didn't love the neighborhood, or they didn't feel safe, which I totally understand, because when I first started hanging out in Cleveland and working there, I could see how that would be a bit of a shock, right? It's a bit of a culture shock for people.
Yeah.
So every now and then I would get like a not so great review, or somebody that would just get there and be like, I'm not even getting out, you know?
Yeah.
But it really wasn't that bad. It was a pretty nice neighborhood. Everybody was super watchful, as they often are in those kind of neighborhoods. So I had this old lady live next door that would call me anytime anything, the garbage can was, you know, she really watched. So so that's kind of how I got into it, and started buying more properties in Cleveland, started Airbnb-ing them. We didn't do a ton of them. We did another duplex like that, and then we did another triplex, actually, which was basically a duplex, but then we put a little loft in the top floor where the attic was, which was a really cool little loft. So
And then did you Airbnb all of these? Hello, everybody. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I just wanted to let you know that I've created a new coaching program. I believe the new coaching program has way more value than any of the programs that have even existed in the past. What we've done is pre-recorded all the lessons so that you can work through it at your own pace, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to meet up on a regular basis to answer the questions, do deal analysis, and actually spend our time together working on things instead of spending our time learning things. I think this will make a seamless transition to buying in the United States and will help you solve a lot of your problems. If this is of interest to you, go to glensutherland.com/coaching. I hope to help you guys invest in the United States, and I hope we provide as much value as possible. Back to the podcast.
yeah. So we had quite a few doors, I guess you'd call it, at the same time on Airbnb, which ended up becoming very like a job. It was like you constantly had to be managing check-ins and stuff like that, and so I didn't really have a good system in place to manage all that, so I was doing it myself. So you know, we made a lot of money, but there was work to it for sure, like managing check-ins and making sure that the cleaners are there, and maintenance issues as usual, right? Like, it's an old house. It was, you know, we had a maintenance guy there, and so yeah, it was cool.
So how's the story continue? Did you end up you still have these? Do you sell these? How did this quarter sort of wrap up?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So while I was doing a lot of the work in the US on these properties, I'd be visiting almost every weekend, sometimes a week or two at a time or longer, just kind of overseeing the projects and stuff, right? And while I was doing that, I'll get a little personal here, is my wife at the time and we ended up getting divorced or splitting up, and which led to a divorce. And so what we did was, to make things what we thought was easier at the time, she ended up taking over a company that I had in Canada, which was my furniture company, my custom furniture business.
Yep.
She already worked within that company and stuff, and kind of was enjoying that more. So and then I took over all the stuff in the US. So it was like, you take that corporation, I'll take the US corporation, and we'll kind of go our separate ways.
Yep.
So then I had all these properties going, and that was fine. And then at a certain point, I started kind of looking into doing flipping a property here in Canada.
Yep.
Which was sort of has always been a dream of mine for a long time. And working with a close friend of mine, who's now my realtor, him and I have done tons of deals here in Canada. But him and I started looking into kind of the options, and started making some good income with my renovation business in Canada. So at a certain point, I kind of had this gut feeling of like, it's been a good run. Let's sell off all these properties in the States. I'm trying to be more at home with the kids, because, you know, at the time I was single, right? And only seeing the kids half the time. So when I had them, you know, I want to see them. So I just thought, less travel, let's just sell everything off. I can get some, like, things are okay right now. I can get some good money for all the properties. And so that's what I did. I sold them off one by one. It went very smoothly except for one of them, which I'll tell you in a minute, but sold everything off. And then, like, literally right after the last one closed, maybe 3 months after that, COVID started becoming a thing. And so then shortly after that, they shut down the borders. So it was good timing for me, because I wouldn't have really been able to do much.
Yeah, because you were going back and forth all the time to, watch over the shoulders of these contractors. So that would have been tricky to do, or impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible.
Yeah, and mind you, by that time I wasn't really growing anymore. I had enough kind of properties with the properties that I had enough there. So it was more just every now and then I go down and check on it and whatever, this and that, right? But yeah, it was just good timing, and it just felt right. And I was like trying to capitalize on the money that I had there saved up to start flipping here in Canada, which was kind of my dream. So so that's essentially what I did. The flipping didn't happen right away. I still had to grow my business in Canada a little bit more, and then COVID and stuff. But yeah, we started flipping here, and yeah.
So if you had to do this over again, or maybe even some lessons you learned, did you have anything that I'm sure there's some stuff, like anytime I talk to anyone who's actually like honest and real, there's always something that didn't quite go as well as it could have, or something you wish you knew. Is there any, like, if you're giving anyone any tips or just anything that happened, anything you'd share with somebody?
Yeah, definitely. I think where to start. I mean, there's so many learning curves in that for me personally, but I guess let me start by saying some of these seminars and courses are amazing, and they have very valuable content. Some of them have very talented and experienced and real people that can really bring a lot of value to these seminars. However, I would also caution that some of them are very expensive, and it gets more, you get deeper and deeper in this hole. And unless you have a lot of funds already, even if you do have a lot of funds, I would say at a certain point, it's like stop going to class and just get into it and jump into it and do a deal. And even if you lose a bit of money, or you didn't make as much profit on that first deal because you had some learning curves, at least you're getting into it.
Totally agree. Totally. There's so many people I know that they sit on the sidelines and they're waiting and waiting, and they never actually do anything. And even if they would have done instead of a home run, a double, they could have made some money. They would have learned something, got better, made a triple the next time, kept growing this. And a lot of times they just never do anything. They just sit and
analysis. And it's like you almost have to expect that you're gonna mess things up. It's your first time, especially if it's your first time. Even your second time, you might. I'm always looking at ways to improve stuff. Like
And so you said you were doing tax liens at the start. Maybe there's like maybe there's some people just like heard that piqued their interest, and they're like, so if you're gonna tell someone who's just gonna go do tax liens for the first time, like, I'm gonna go out on a limb and probably say you should probably get some education first. But is this something like that as a Canadian you could just go and buy, or like should there be things you should be looking out for, or anything about doing a tax lien that other people might be interested to know?
Yeah, I think for most people, tax lien investing is something that you're not just gonna go out and do without some sort of training, or somebody who's kind of taking you under their wing, or some sort of training system, because it's pretty complicated and there's a lot of nuances, especially in different states. It's different. Every state has their own rules and regulations and stuff. So for sure, it's something, if you're going to get into it, as with anything, you're probably going to have to set up a solid team of like a good accountant, ideally probably an accountant who's versed in both US and Canada, a lawyer and stuff to set up your structures, whatever that is going to be for you, right? It's always different for everybody. So those are the obvious ones, but it's a pretty interesting thing, and it's not as complicated as it seems at first. You just have to realize that, I mean, the concept is pretty simple. It's like somebody essentially, like, let's say there's a person who has a house, and this is what happens in the US a lot, is they run into health issues, or somebody gets sick or lose their job or whatever, right? And they can't pay the mortgage for a while or for extended period of time, because it's like, well, are we going to pay for the meds that keep me alive, or am I going to pay for the mortgage, right? And so sometimes they fall behind, and so then at a certain point the bank puts a lien on their house, and or sorry, the county puts a lien on the house, right? If they
Like
stop.
taxes, yeah.
So the county still wants their money because they got to pay the firefighters and build the roads and do all the stuff. So they put the lien that they put on the house, they allow an investor to buy that lien, and then once that lien gets paid back by the homeowner, ideally, the investor gets his money back plus a certain percentage. So now the homeowner has to pay their taxes back plus that percentage, which adds up, which gets them deeper into that hole. So unfortunately, sometimes people cannot pay the tax liens off, and after a certain amount of years, it goes to foreclosure. And this is how you end up with a property instead of just a lien that was supposed to be a paper investment, just turned into a giant house in Cleveland that you didn't really want, right? So that's where you really got to look out for the details. It's like, okay, I'm buying a lien, but what happens if, if this thing cashes out, as I'll call it, everybody's got a different term for it, but if this lien expires and you end up having to, you'll basically have to go through the foreclosure process, which is a pretty significant expense and time, and then eventually get that property. But is it going to be worth it at the end with your lien that you paid for, the amount of time you've been waiting for it, the legal fees and all that stuff? And then what's the house that you're going to get at the end? Who knows, right? So this is where sometimes if you ideally buy a lien on a house that's like a multi-million-dollar beautiful mansion in Florida, and these people just had an oversight of their taxes, or they just whatever, it's just been a couple of years and business is slow and they just don't care, they're going to pay it back. That's a good lien because you know that you're going to get your money back plus that interest. And if they don't, then you just hit the jackpot. You just got a beautiful mansion in Florida, multi-million-dollar mansion for probably a very small lien, right? So it's just in the due diligence of looking at the property attached to the lien, and that could be done by various ways online, but ideally you want some boots on the ground here and there too, right? To verify things. But so that's kind of
and maybe I'll jump in there. Like if you this whole process, which Paul said, like it is different from state to state. Like some of them it'll roll, like if the liens will turn into where you can get the deed for it. Some of them are completely different systems. The deed system, like after the lien's done, the lien goes to auction for the deed. And some of them, even whenever you get the deed, there's a redemption period. Like in Alabama, for instance, there's a redemption period that even after you get the deed, they could buy back the deed based on the liens on it, everything, and they could take the property back. So you just got to and that's why you do education, because it's different from state to state. And that's why it's hard to even say like, this is the process, because, Texas, Alabama, Ohio, all different. Like they do this all different anyway. Sorry.
I was just throwing states out there, Florida, or whatever, but but Cleveland is the only one that I ever really got into. And just to kind of simplify it and kind of hone in on an area, it's like might as well kind of learn one specific area and stuff. But we ended up paying like $3,500 for this one lien, and it looked like this nice little house on the corner. And then we ended up having to go through that whole foreclosure process, which took forever, tons of legal fees and stuff, but still ended up working out. But it was just a long time and a lot more fees than we initially expected. So for sure, it's like be cautious with what you're buying, like especially if it's got the potential to redeem. But like you said, a lot of states may not even have that whole system where you're right, they go to auctions and banks these auctions and buy up tons of liens too, right?
Oh yeah, they do. And even that's another thing. Like some of these states, you can just go buy a single lien, and some of them you have to buy a bundle of liens. They won't even sell you one, right? They make it a rich man's game, or at least not a poor man's game, depending where you are.
There's definitely some weird monopolies, I think, in that, because when I was talking to the owner of that company that was doing the tax liens, he was a really interesting guy. He was saying how because they had such a big portfolio that they would get way favorable treatment, maybe even some like first glances at some files and stuff. It's like, but anyways.
But you're also like, a lot of times you're buying these blind, like legally, you're not supposed to be looking in the windows or going into the properties. Like you're breaking and entering if you do. But like, so you never really know what they are. I had a property that I was looking at in Huntsville, on the south end, and what happened with that is we went and it was in the foreclosure list, and we were looking at it that way, and then we couldn't Oh no, we sent the foundation guy. Well, friend sent the home inspector through first, and then because it was in foreclosure, so we had that ability. And then we sent the foundation guy because they're like, the foundation is wrecked. Like, you need to send a professional. I can't give you a good quote. I don't really know what to do on that. And this house is like huge. Like, this is like a 5,000 square foot Adams family house with the two double staircase in the front entrance. Like, and I was like, this is so awesome, but it was in foreclosure, so it was like a quarter of the price of what the ARV should be when you sell it. And I was like, oh, there's so much money to be made here, and it's so cool. But then we got the foundation guy in there, and he went and looked in the basement, and he's just like, this whole basement is crumbling. They must have poured this in a wet season or something. They like, what we need to do this property is lift the house up, tear the foundation, and put a new foundation on. So it means cutting all the electrical, all the plumbing, everything for the whole house. And I'm like, what is the other solution? The other solution is we pour a 2-foot thick concrete in the basement inside of the other one, but we also have to make it lower. You're going to lose your basement, and we're going to have to put beams across to support the house that's sitting on there to do it. And it's not that much cheaper than just picking the whole house up and putting a new foundation anyway. And I was like, I ended up walking away from it. But long story short, what happened with that house is it went to an auction, and it was sold sight unseen, and somebody else bought that sight unseen. And I don't know what happened with it, but
probably bankrupt over it.
yeah, but they bought it sight unseen. They probably looked at the outside and they're like, look at this mansion. It looks awesome. We're gonna make so much money.
Guilty of it myself. That first one, we looked at that PDF, and we're like, oh, look at it. It's got good bones.
Yeah. So you don't know. And you got to have enough money, like, to make sure that you can pull this off, right? Don't be putting your last penny in to buy the house, because you're likely going to need some renovations, right? Like, I always say that, like, if you buy a short sale, it's probably in better condition than a foreclosure, because the short sale, the tenant has, or the previous owner or whatever has had time and left. And if you do foreclosure, they're kind of forced out of their home, and you might have a little bit more damage. And if you buy like a tax lien or a tax deed, you might even have a little bit more damage than the foreclosure, right? But you never know. Sometimes there's gems in there. I've had like Casey on the show, and he does them in Indiana, and he gets some gems out of the whole thing. But it's you gotta know what you're doing, or at least have the pockets to bail that project out.
Yeah. So the tax liens is definitely like a niche kind of cool thing to get into, and I think it's, if you're interested in stuff like that and really kind of figure that out, I think that it's really cool. The other thing I wanted to mention to some of the people that are listening to your stuff is about just Cleveland and just Airbnbs and stuff in general, because Cleveland was such a cool city because they have Cleveland Clinic there, which is a humongous, it's one of the, I think it might be the largest, but it's one of the largest medical institutions, I'll call it, in the States. And they have many, many, many huge buildings all over Cleveland where they have, I guess, world-class professional medical people coming to do all kinds of procedures. So what happens is tons of people in the US will travel to Cleveland to get procedures done, and you have doctors and nurses coming to train there and learn stuff, and so you have all this movement. On top of that, Cleveland is a pretty bustling place downtown and stuff as well. Like, they got major sports teams, and they've got big concerts and things like that. So it's not all doom and gloom and
No.
run. It's really bouncing back in some areas, and it's a really cool town, actually. But it's got its pockets where it's not, not so nice and stuff. But what I wanted to say about that is, with that Airbnb thing, is that that was one thing that we did do our due diligence on a little bit, is about Cleveland in general before we bought the place. And that was one of the things also discovered, was that Cleveland Clinic, and just there was a lot going on. And that's what our tenants ended up being, for the most part, was doctors and nurses and people that would stay for extended periods of time, maybe a week or a couple weeks or a month even. Those were kind of the people we were targeting. So we would set huge discounts for long-term stays,
Right.
But the stays were more expensive. So it ended up working out pretty well. It was less hours and just the right kind of people who just wanted to come home, microwave some food, so, whatever. So,
yeah, that's awesome. I just started getting into Cleveland myself, which was one of those things I wasn't sure if I was going to get into, but I was already in in Ohio. So I was doing Dayton and Toledo, and now we're buying Cleveland as well. So
You've been physically or no?
yeah, we went down there in August, and we went to a real estate meetup and had some drinks and met some contractors and property managers. And then second day we went and toured a bunch of houses, saw the projects they're working on. You get an idea of how their work is. You get to see, in the mid project. That's what I wanted. I didn't want to see finished product, but we did see one of them that was finished. But I like to see like how it's coming along, and you can see how many people are there when you just show up on a Tuesday. Who's actually working, right? Which is a whole different thing, right? But yeah, no, we went down. I don't always go down. A lot of times I've set up teams without even going there at all. But anytime I do go somewhere, I set up a team. I went on vacation to Kentucky this summer to do the caves and stuff, and I set up a team, went and met property managers and contractors while I was on vacation because why not? I'm like, maybe there's something here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, no, what was your impression of Cleveland? Did you go like downtown and stuff? Like it's pretty cool,
downtown, right? where the meetup was not far from the Brown Stadium. It was past it and around and over to the water, right on the water over there. So it was a really nice part of town where we were there, right? And then we were, we went and saw a few different neighborhoods. We didn't go into like proper East Cleveland or anything like that, but we
one of my properties was in proper East Cleveland, and it was that was the one that was the worst, the nightmare one. It was bad. They ended up having like a dog fighting ring or something in the basement, and my realtor went there to
oh my god,
and she like went to the basement, and then there's no lights, of course, so she stepped on this, and she stepped on this like yeah, some big company bought it though, out of California. They were buying up tons and tons of properties in East Cleveland. God knows why, but close, but
you can find a property manager to manage it who is good with rough situations, and there's money to be made, but it's a tough go.
Wild place. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm all about, but I don't know. Who am I to say?
Yeah. Anyway, before we go to Paul here is a real handy guy, and we're not really even talking about, you were doing you do all kinds of stuff in Canada too, right? You have KW Renovations, you're building tiny homes. I saw like you're into everything. Like I was actually looking at buying a container, like one that was done, and I was looking at them on Facebook Marketplace from my backyard because we put a pool in, so I'm like as one of the options as a pool house, and then like your listing came up. I was like, oh, it's Paul's. You're already friends with this person. But yes, maybe tell us a little bit about what you do in Canada too.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah. So I have KW Renovations. We do residential renovations. We really focus on like basements and bathrooms. We like to do a lot of those, but we do exterior work as well, like decks and fences. But I'd say mostly
you did my kitchen. You came in and did the demo and
I wasn't even there. I was
no. What your team though? Your guys. You weren't there, but the guys were there. Your company was there. Yeah.
So yeah, residential renovation stuff in Kitchener and Waterloo and Cambridge. But yeah, and then I've started getting in the tiny homes. That's really cool. Like that's just another one of those passion things that I've always kind of thought was so cool and wanted to do. And I had partially built one a couple years ago. So started planning out doing some of these tiny homes, and we ended up buying a property up north in Huntsville, just outside of Huntsville actually. It's just over 9 acres, and it's just all forest, but it has a couple of clearings. So so we built a tiny home shipping container and delivered it there, and then we put little trails through the property and stuff. So again, AirBNBing that out. Yeah, we're also building those for clients, although we haven't had many orders or anything. But truth be told, I've been focused quite a bit on the renovation side of things. We're kind of just locked in on some targets and some goals with that, so just really pushing that. But it was just more of a fun project, passion thing, and try to make some money with the side. It's never a bad thing, I guess.
Yeah, no, you're like me. You got a lot of balls in the court, and some of them like you're like really going heavy, and some of them you're just this is a passion project, stuff I like to do. And yeah, no, anyway, they looked really good. If we send me a link, I'll put it in the show notes of like some of these homes, but they're pretty sexy little containers.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
No,
Paul,
very close to your house too. Built out in Wellesley, Ontario.
oh yeah, you have a shop there, don't you? You have to let me know when you're at the shop. I'll swing by. I'll bring some
Yeah,
some
good.
beverages.
Yeah.
Okay. Paul, if people wanted to get a hold of you, they're interested in, KW renovations, they're interested in tiny homes, they're interested in just tax liens or just, I had a question or two. How do they find you?
Yeah, kwrenovations.ca. And then my email is on there. There's a contact form at the bottom that you can that'll go straight to my email as well. But it's info@kwrenovations.ca. So it's pretty simple. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Lots of value, like lots of stuff about tax liens, a lot of stuff, just stories. I love stories. I love stories. Anyway, thanks for coming on the show. This is great.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
That was a nice video. Bye.